For the ones who are like just joining, a little bit of housekeeping. Welcome to the fourth session of the 10-We-1 Summit. It's great to have you all here today. My name is Patricio del Boca. I'm the tech leader of the Open Knowledge Foundation and will be the moderator of the next panel. Before we start, this is a 1-hour panel where the speakers will do the interventions, following by a small conversation with the audience or questions if we have the time. But please use the chat to ask questions during the interventions if you have one. And in case we don't have time at the end, we will do our best to address them. Also, please keep your microphone mute unless you are requested to speak. And an important reminder, this panel is held in English, but automatic translations are available in this Zoom meeting. In order to do that, you need to go to the captions. And also, if you are a speaker, also go to captions down and select your language. So the tool can identify in which language are you going to speak to do the translation. These events follow the Open Knowledge Code of Conduct, as we want to promote a healthy, respectful, and thoughtful conversation between people from different backgrounds. Aggressive behavior will not be tolerated, and any participant may be removed if necessary. This session is also being broadcast live on YouTube. We have like a hashtag the tech we want, in case you want to share what is being said here. So let's do it. It's a super interesting panel. I'm super excited to have all of them here. We are going to be talking with Isabela Fernandes, the Executive Director of the Tor project, with Sid Drmay, Community Manager of the Open Source Hardware Association, with Denis Jaromil Roio, Director of Dynabolic Foundation, with Kooyman, Executive Director of the Free Software Foundation, and Oduor Lungati, Executive Director of Ushahidi. This panel, it's called about we are making the tech we want. As I mentioned, we have here amazing creators that have been creating technology or managing like entire teams of engineers and product developers to make software that is making sense. So in this conversation, we are going to be sharing trajectories, experiences, and learning of some open, free, and alternative technologies. So thank you all for being here. Isabella, if you're okay, I would like to start with you because we have been talking about like sustainability and the tech we want at the beginning. Mostly from the tech or hacking community, sometimes we oversimplify when saying that technology should be simple, easy to understand, and not specialized in order to be sustainable and affordable. However, like the Tor project, for example, cannot escape like the inherent complexity of the problem that it's trying to solve. I mean, you need specialized knowledge and you need complex technology, at least more complex than a simple web application. So my question is like, when it comes to creating the tech we want, and given the complex of the context of the Tor project, what are the biggest challenges that you're facing like daily?
Hi, Patricio. Hi, everybody from the panel. Thank you for having me here. It's an honor to share the panel with so many great people. I want to start with a personal story and then I get to Tor, if possible. But when thinking about creating the tech we want, I think about how I started to create tech. Back in 2000, I was part of a collective that started an independent news site in Brazil. This group was part of a global network with collectives all over the world. I think we had around 150 collectives, and each collective had a website. All those sites allowed anyone to publish articles on them. It was the first ever platform for citizen journalism before any social media or YouTube. I have volunteered for this project for a decade. The websites were all free software. We owned the servers where they were hosted. We were not using any cloud servers, any AWS or anything like that. We were using data centers co-ops. At some point, our website in Brazil was getting 4 million page views per month. And this was between 2003, 2004. And in Brazil in particular, we decided to prioritize free software on everything we did. And that decision helped to spread the adoption of free software as well as its development, especially for solutions related with media production and distribution. For a decade, no one in Brazil ever received a penny for the work that we were doing. And it wasn't as if we all had tons of money to do that. I, for instance, was very poor. Sometimes I didn't have money for food or housing, but I was still working on this project. And after that, I worked for the government and spent a little bit with the industry. And it was funny when I started to work for the industry because I arrived thinking that I knew very little, that everyone there were experts. I don't have a college degree. Everything I know, I learned during that decade, doing volunteer work, building technology for activists and social movements. However, once I was there, I realized that I knew way more than many MBA people. I saw MBA. I say MBA because I end up with the product manager role, and normally the MBA people are the ones that take those roles in the industry. And then the MBA people knew nothing about the history of the internet or the technology behind it. All they did was to copy someone else's idea. The tag they built was to make the metrics for business to grow. They didn't care about the impact of technology in the world or anything like that. And all this despite the fact that if you go to Silicon Valley today, everyone with a tech job will be claiming that whatever they're building is going to change the world because this is how they believe inside of the little bubble. But anyways, I left this hell and went back to the free software world. I joined the Talk project at first as a project manager. I got a pay cut for that, but that saved my mental health or my soul. And I became the executive director at Tor and faced many difficulties and battled against them with the help of Tor folks. It's not easy. We are always under capacity and looking for money to grow. We are building technology to protect people's privacy and help them bypass censorship. We are going against what a billion-dollar industry is based on, data collection and mass surveillance. We need to deal with censorship against Tor and be creative when building solutions to circumvent that. We have many challenges, like stay on the top of security vulnerabilities and build defenses for that. And because we are a free software organization and a community-focused project, we also need to invest in our community, right? We need to provide them support and some governance structure for it to stay organized. But because we are doing all of this, there are also millions of people around the world who are using our technology to protect the privacy from big tech, to be anonymous in hostile environments, to document the truth and publish them, to fight for a better world. And if you think about the situation of Palestinians today, where Israel is using AI like Project Lavender and What is Daddy to pick who to kill, the need to provide a way for people to protect the data from mass collection that feeds these types of AI technology becomes crucial. At Tor, we have plenty of people that could be working somewhere else. Some folks came from the industry with higher salaries that we can offer them. However, at Tor, they are building the tech we want for the world, right? Like the tech that can provide some protection for people whose data is being collected by Lavender or What is Daddy. We know our work is helping millions of people, and it's not just about that. We're also trying to build an organization that reflects the society we want as well. We are trying hard to build policies and processes that bring the values that are important for all of us. But I also want to end this by saying that to build the tech we want, we need way more people than just those who are writing code. We need people working on different tasks as well. People who can ensure everyone has good benefits, people who can ensure we are bringing in the money to pay everyone's salaries, folks that work with our communities or give support to our users, folks who are keeping our bills and contracts organized. We need everyone to do that, right? Like not just an engineer. So I'm gonna end with this because I wanted to just raise how important it is to value everyone's contribution when we are in this process. Thank you.
Thank you, Isabella. Yeah, and your last comment resonates a little bit with what we were talking about when we talk about like maintenance of software in the panel. that we say, okay, we need to also focus on like the people that is not technical, but they are supporting the project in like other efforts that are not technical, because there are non-technical things that also needs to be maintained. So I completely second that comment. Okay, so I know you're joining from like the phone. Can you hear us okay? Are you present? I would like to follow up with you.
Yes, can you hear me properly?
Yes, we can hear you just perfect.
Good.
Thank you, Zoe, for joining. As a free activist, I feel like we are fighting like with giants. Like we cannot compete with Google, Microsoft, Apple. We do not have the same resources, and sometimes pragmatism win, and we end up using like proprietary tools. The tech we want roadmap is not clear, mostly when we talk about like sustainability. And it is not a secret that a lot of open source initiatives like us lacks of proper funding and sustainable models. So how can we move towards more sustainable and competitive movement that allows us to focus like our talents and efforts in building the tech we want?
Yeah, well, first, thank you for having me. I'm excited to be here today with all of these people making a difference towards building a world in which we all use the tech that we want. I like the initiative of this. I am the executive director of the Free Software Foundation, of course, and we've been pushing for the creation of free software, or the tech that we want, since 1985. And I think the thing for us, which actually sort of propels me into a little speech right away, is that I think a lot of getting to build the tech that you want is making sure that you create demand. I wish personally, for example, that I could have joined the actual video conference today. But as the Open Knowledge Foundation was kindly facilitating, I am using my phone to call into this conversation. Because at the FSF, one of the things that we believe is when it comes down to creating the tech that we want on the receiving end, is also to make sure to use the tech that we want to see, which allows us to put a positive light in the positive and deny the power from the proprietary software organizations. Zoom is one of those organizations that denies people their software freedom and violates people's privacy to the extent that in some cases they've denied people to actually speak on their platform. Just to connect it back to the summit, we choose at the FSF not to use such damaging programs and choose to use programs that are made by our community members for our own initiatives. And I just discussed this with the Open Knowledge Foundation. I don't mean to put you all on the spot like this, because I know that when we were planning my attendance, you said that you would have wished to be able to do this, and time was not on your side this year. But I challenge you to next year create a tech summit on a different platform. Just to get back to the demand bit, I think we cannot compete with Google, but we can refuse to use it, even if it's just once. If everyday users demand the software freedom that they want, the tech that they want to use to control the technology in their lives and be able to run, study, modify, and distribute the software, then change will happen. It might be slow, and we might not be able to compete with the bigger forces out there, but it is something that is in this world and has been in this world for about 50 years, and we keep moving forward, and we keep growing, and we keep having super interesting, talented, and amazing people like the people in this panel on our side. I'll leave it at that for now and learn more about what the others have to say as well.
Okay, thank you, Zoe. Yes, and I appreciate like the challenging questions and the challenging comments as Cassandra wrote. Cassandra, also, I'm gonna take the opportunity to mention Cassandra is part of the Open Knowledge Network team. She's helping like in the backgrounds to moderate the chant and muting persons and keeping the house in order. So Cassandra, I send you like a big heart from here. She's always doing like the amazing work in the backgrounds. And as she mentioned in the chat, challenge accepted for next year. Sometimes like we end up like in pragmatism. So I appreciate your challenging thoughts on this. Sid, I would like to follow up with you. So I must admit that when I was thinking and when we were like planning on the tech we want, I didn't even think about hardware. So I'm more than happy to have you here because I think it's like a perspective and that will add a lot of value. We have been talking about hardware in previous panels, mostly about like sustainability panels. So I'm happy to have you here. The tech we want is a little bit biased towards software, since at least it's our expertise. But hardware is, of course, also technology, and sometimes an underside technology. We'll think that sometimes problems and threats will come from software vulnerabilities or like surveillance, but sometimes it comes from the hardware itself. It was mentioned here before, but what happened in Lebanon with beepers, for example, was I think an eye-opening for a lot of people of like the role that hardware plays in our lives. So coming from the software, I would like to ask you, what is the hardware we want? And how can we create more bridges between the software and the hardware communities so we can build a more comprehensive tech we want?
Yeah, so like everyone, I'm really excited to be here today. This is a really wonderful initiative and effort, and I really love all the conversation that's been happening so far. It's been really amazing. So I'm Drmay. I'm the community organizer for the Open Source Hardware Association. So our primary work is around making sure that hardware is open source. So we do this in a few different ways. Another role that I take on in the organization is I'm also the Summit Fellowship Chair, which is our mentorship opportunity for our yearly Open Hardware Summit, which the next one is coming up in May 2025 in Edinburgh. If anyone's feeling like they want to get a little bit more engaged with what hardware can look like, that's a great place to start. I think we do a really good job at the summit. People really enjoy what happens there. And it's basically, the way we describe it is really weird science fair. So if that's something that interests you, that'll be coming soon. And then we are also accepting proposals there. Another thing that we do is the certification program, which is an entirely free program that helps people go through and know for sure that something that says that it's open source is in fact open source. We do have kind of a problem in the overarching community that some people like to claim open source because it looks good when they're advertising, but the actual reality of the components, what's going on within the machinery is that it's not open source and they can't recreate it anywhere. So with the certification program, we allow people to submit their work. We give it a quick review. We make sure that all the information is there. And then if it's open source, we add it to our database. We give them a UID so that they can advertise that and let people know and connect that way. And then if it isn't fully open source, we usually just send an email, have a conversation, make sure folks understand what it really means to have open source hardware. And we want it to stay open for a lot of reasons that have been coming up today. Hardware is interesting for a few different reasons. When it comes to software, as a lot of y'all probably know, you own the patent the moment you write it. That belongs to you, it's your work. When it comes to hardware, you have to submit a patent if you want it to be patented. And within that, people usually get caught up in what it means to be copyrighted, what it means to own their work, whether or not they want to sell their work. And a lot of times, because of, the world, capitalism, how we live, there's a big pressure to make something viable, a product. And part of that is thinking that you need to lock down the information that's within that product. Whereas within our community, we do actually see that having open source hardware does not necessarily mean that your business model is no longer viable. It does not mean that you can't keep producing things, keep having people interested in your work. It really just means that people can build on it, share, iterate, find new ways to interact with something you've made, which is something that we think is really, really important, both from just having a really beautiful, thriving, wonderful community of people that are making cool things, but also from an ethical and moral standpoint, there's really not much of a reason to lock down the information and the the blueprints, the data, the GitHub, all that. Locking all that down really does just make it that we're halting progress. So being able to spread hardware in a way that allows people to explore and experiment, iterate, share, find new ways to make something you've created, and then in 2, 3, 4 generations, it's completely different or doing all these new features is really exciting. And for us, we really like to see it as not just like, we do very much obviously have a huge tech aspect to our hardware. We do see a lot of tech-based hardware, but for us, we consider it anything that is made of atoms rather than bits. So even though we do have about 8,000 breakout boards that are, of course, open source certified, we do also have things like open source perfumes, we have open source hammocks, we have open source planting tables. These are all ways that we really like to have folks engage with the idea that like, you don't have to lock down knowledge. And especially many of us involved in Oshawa are very passionate about historical crafting knowledge, and how that is a really good example of like, you learn to knit from your grandma learned to knit from her grandma. That's knowledge that's being passed down, that even though people don't think of that as a hardware anymore, like that is hardware. Figuring out knitting machines was hardware. This is like a really great way to approach that. Like, this is all a technology, even though we've kind of changed what technology means at this point to specifically mean things that are electronically produced or soldered. Like, these are all technologies, and we love to see them open source. We love to be able to share those ideas and be able to grow them. And we've been seeing a lot of really great cross sections between the software and hardware side of things. Overall, we kind of consider ourselves to be about 10 years behind the open software movement. So we're still trying to catch up, but we're still very much, we've got stake in this game. We're doing a lot of work around policy. We're doing a lot of work around accessibility. Right now, we are starting off on a really massive journey on open source healthware. So we're looking at ways that we can make sure that products that are made specifically for the health sphere can get approved properly and get into everyday use without being kind of held back by the ideas of like FDA policies that kind of hold back because they don't think that open is necessarily safe, when at this, we are producing these things to be safe. They are safe and accessible. We saw a lot of this work around the pandemic, around different face shields, face masks, and respirator hacks that were extremely important. So we're really trying to see how we can make that happen. Yeah, and then something like, just to quickly touch on what happened in Lebanon, I think it's really important to recognize that the ways that the supply chain can be infected, it can be used to the advantage of colonizers, of oppressors, and it can be used for violence. And one of the ways that we can avoid that is being sure what's happening in a device, what's supposed to look like, what it's supposed to be put together like. So something like this is really important as a way to really kind of be more aware of what our devices are doing, what they're supposed to look like, what we should see within them. Maybe not everyone's going to pop open their devices and see what's going on, but those of us who do, it's very integral to be able to recognize that, like, oh, this is not supposed to be in here, which means that something went wrong. And whether it was wrong on purpose or wrong by accident, that's something that needs to be addressed. We need to acknowledge it. We need to figure out how to fix that. So yeah, we would really love to see y'all involved in the community. We'd love to see more software folks involved. Come to the summit if you want like a good intro. We do a hybrid format, so it will be in Edinburgh, but it will also all be streamed online. And yeah, just investigate the projects that you're involved in and figure out what the actual hardware portion of it looks like. And you'll probably be really excited to learn some new things.
Well, thank you, Sid, for your comments. When you mentioned that you consider your movement like 10 years before like the open movement, two things that come into my mind. First is like, okay, we as an open free movement, what can we do to help you like maybe accelerate like what's left or if it is needed? And also like the other day I engaged in a conversation in Twitter because they launched like a new hardware to put your phones and block it, and then it will not transmit. So people say, okay, how can we trust you? And I jump in the conversation, say, hey, is this open hardware? I mean, this can be like audited, or like patents, or like blueprints, everything. And the whole like security by obscurity conversation that we have like in the open movement like time ago, it started happening again in the hardware movement. And I say, okay, oh, we already crossed this bridge in our community. How can we help to? Well, I'm not saying we cross it completely, but so thinking, okay, how can we help this movement? Thank you very much. Jaromil, one of two.
Hi.
I would like to follow
Hi,
up with
everyone.
you. Hey, so you are a hacker with a lot of experience building things in grassroots projects. So what are you working on, and how do you navigate the fast-moving ecosystem of tools to build the web? And do you think the way we are building technology and mostly digital public infrastructure that has been mentioned a little bit is sustainable?
Can I share some slides?
I think yes, you are sharing.
Cool. Wait a second. You should see the slides, I think, by now, and
Yes, we can see it.
and me.
Yes.
Yeah. Thanks really for inviting me. I'll give you a brief overlook. We are not really concentrated on one project. As you say, we are a hacker community, Grassroots. Our main inspiration is the Free Software Foundation, so I'm honored to be in the same panel, yet challenging impure technologies to join. And yeah, this is our main focus. And it's interesting to see how the top most rich companies in the world right now, they do software for profit. So they're moved by profit when they think of software. And you can, in a nutshell, imagine Dynorg is a software development organization. So we are not advocating for free software. A lot of people do that already. We write software, just like many other organizations here. And we do it not for a profit. We just try to understand when a community, when society benefits from it. And we write a lot of small projects. 2 GNU Linux distributions I'll be talking about, and try to connect them, try to connect with what exists. So we observe a lot the boundaries. And yeah, this is the main inspiration, was also my research for a number of years. You'll find my dissertation on the website. The concern that moves me nowadays, and yeah, a team of about 15 people now, is the fact that algorithms can really control us. Someone can develop a game with incentives that will make people do things they really don't want, or that makes no sense for the people around them, let alone the fact that they are always looking at a screen and trapped into this mesmerizing cage. But also these screens may insert incentives for people to do things. So you can imagine nowadays that there can be a cyber attack driven to a whole community or society just by marketing a game to all the youth and letting them cross railways, just like Pokemon Go did at the launch, creating quite a problem for peace and rest. So these are the three pillars of our foundation. That's what we work, how we work to develop a sovereignty in algorithms. First of all, we believe that interdisciplinarity is key. It was already mentioned here. You can see it as diversity in many different ways, disciplines. For us, it's also transgenerational. The oldest members of our tribes, the community organizer of DevOne, the project I'll talk about, she's almost 80 now. And the youngest people are around 90 or 20. And this, I think, makes our communities, I'm aware not only Dynorg can have this diversity, really unique, I think, and it's important. Free and Libre software, so the 4 freedoms that were briefly remembered by our colleagues at FSF, and sustainability. So we try to make software that runs on all computers. This is what it means for us, sustainability. When we are challenged to develop a new software, we look at the infrastructure and we make sure that what we write runs on it. We don't want to require new hardware. We like to recycle existing infrastructure, recombine hardware pieces, and not require new phones. This is not really like only a mission, it's a passion, because you can imagine we have two ancient computer musea in south of Italy that we maintain, and people in our network are really passionate about old software, like Unix software written to run in 64 kilobytes of memory. So we love optimizing for this sort of old stuff. It's really a passion. In this regard, we are close to other communities. I like to mention, for instance, the suckless community that does software that just sucks less. That's how they say it. And for them, it means to write less lines of code rather than more. So we also challenge ourselves on their principles, write less code so that people can read it. And it's not super complex. I'd rather comment, yeah, these are some of the things we do, some of the fields in which we are active. But I like keep commenting on the fact that the corporate way of doing things, what we are up against mostly, is to augment complexity, to create a lot of technical debt. And we notice that when that technical debt is created, then humans start disappearing, struggling, and soon probably substituted with AI. We work with the European Commission as our main partner. So the projects that we have been funded became some flagship and success stories. I will not go through them, but I will mention just two campaigns that we support horizontally through all the projects that are running in Europe. One is public money for public code, because we believe that we must apply free and open source licensing to everything that is funded by public. And the public should always try to upstream the contributions to free and open source projects. And the other campaign that we are part of is a successful one, is the one for the right to repair, which I'm happy to say it became a law effective as of February 24 in Europe. So now industries that produce hardware and sell things, they have to adapt to the fact that they need to provide ways to repair these things, to provide the services for them, and exchange parts. This is especially relevant also for public infrastructure, as for instance, on the hype of the smart cities, we have been sold new devices to pollute our public space, and often they are not produced after 3 or 4 years. So public sector is left without even a source for updating. This is our showcase, is a shop literally on the high street of GitHub. And I like to show it because we don't step back from this sort of corporate appropriations of the open source communities. We want to be present there to tell younger people that step in that another way is possible. And I think that if we step out of places like Discord or GitHub, that are horrible, of course, they are a tragedy of the commons. But if we step out, then the younger people, the new people that step in, they will stop seeing us. So I can tell you one strategy that we have for chats is we have our chats on dark IRC, the IRC systems that run over Tor to be private, but also we bridge them eventually to other systems like Discord, and constantly tell people, leave Discord and join this, read this tutorial and go and learn the hard path. We must always keep in mind it's hard to actually nowadays it's hard to use free and open source software. So rather than making it easier also, but also making people understand that life is not easy and you must really work hard to be independent. One of our Linux distributions is Dev1. We are very proud of this year. It's 10 years old. It's a community-driven fork of Debian. We fork over the adoption of systemd as an init system. This is a very geeky issue. Systemd was developed by a developer at Red Hat that now works at Microsoft, and by a community of people that believed it needed to be substituting the System 5 Unix init. This is the first process that runs into a GNU Linux system, is the one that launches every other process. So we supported the idea that systemd had many flows, and with us there were many, many people. 10 years passed, so today I don't need to tell you what were our predictions, because they all became true. Debian had so many CVEs that are security advisories in the last 10 years that we can consider it not anymore a stable system. I'm sorry to say also Tails is based on Debian and runs systemd. So these are real threats that we identified into the systems, and we developed a fork that nowadays has a very large community, and we managed to make it release every new Debian release, a new one in Dev 1. Another distribution I'm happy to show you is Dynabolic. This was one of the first 100% free and open source software distributions approved by the Free Software Foundation. And Richard Stallman himself tried it out and sent some corrections already back 20 years ago. Is Rasta software. It was built between trips in India and Palestine and Indonesia. Was perfectioned for independent media centers that want to make their own radio. One of our bigger projects was with the Iraqi Linux user group during the Iraq war, also to let people run Tor, which was shipped on this distribution already in 2006, and then also run their own streaming radio. Our latest project, and this is the last one I'm talking about, is Zeroom. Zeroom was born out of a collaboration with the European Commission, led by Francesca Bria as principal investigator. And we came up with this idea of developing a virtual machine that runs in 2 megabytes of RAM, the payload is only 1.5, and it's programmable in human-like language. So this machine can do a lot of cryptographic stuff, compatible with mostly on elliptic curves, zero knowledge proof, and whatnot. We have also the latest FIPS 203 and 204, so the latest standards in US for post-quantum. The important thing, just that it's small, but that is programmable in human-like language. We can empower domain experts to write this domain-specific language so that their knowledge can be transferred in code. So even in the professional work that we do as software developers, we know that the overhead of communication between domain experts and developers is huge. And sometimes you get lost, and also you need to verify, since lawyers should be able to verify many parts, administers and transforms private data. So we try to bridge this by bringing people closer to the code. And yeah, this is my last concern, my last question that I leave to you. And this is the question that I ask myself every time I write a new software. If I'm developing it for machines to understand humans, I believe I'm just joining a huge industry is making a lot of profit on this approach. And nowadays it's even more evident with large language models that are processing our thoughts. On the other side, I think for an ethical stance, of course, staying with the 4 freedoms of free and open source, but also asking ourselves about the purpose of the software we write, I think we should write software that allows humans to understand machines. And this is what we try to do. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Jaromil. I like that last quote of writing software for humans to understand machines. You mentioned interdisciplinarity, and I think that's also something that came up like a lot in the previous panels. So I want to jump to our last panelist today, Angela Oduor Lungati. one of the main motivations of the TW1 was the absurd complexity and how unaffordable developers are for local communities and local governments of Argentina, where I come from, and as well like all parts of Latin America. Building technology became kind of like a luxury for everyone. Ushahidi is a successful example of a not-for-profit technology company that resembles a little bit because Jaromil also mentioned they are like a not-for-profit, like a development company. But Ushahidi is another great example of this that is born in Africa. So I'm wondering, did you encounter the same barriers with the affordability of technological talent? And if so, what strategy did you have to overcome that challenge? And lastly, what's your experience and your views with the current landscape of tools and technologies, and if they do align with the local realities of knowledge and resources?
Generally, I think 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 generally, I think
I think the audio is stuck.
generally, I think
Yeah. Can you hear us, Angela?
generally, I think generally, I think generally, I think
Yeah, your audio is on loop. It's like generally, I think it. Generally, I think it.
generally, I think generally, I
So maybe you can try muting yourself. No, we cannot hear you.
generally, I think generally, I think generally, I think
No, sorry. Yeah, maybe try to reconnect.
generally,
Yeah. Of course, that cannot be a tech conference without tech problems. I'm gonna give a little. Oh yeah, wait for the demos tomorrow. Yeah, true, Sarah. Tomorrow we have for the newcomers here. So I'm going to take the opportunity to mention that tomorrow we're going to have like a full session of demos of software. So keep in touch and go to the website and check the agenda. And we expect to see you all tomorrow. I think Angela, you're back again.
Generally, I think 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 generally, I think
Yeah.
generally, I think
Yeah, no, sorry. It's a weird glitch. That.
All right. How about now? Can you hear me now?
Oh, yeah. Yes, we can hear you perfectly now.
I'm sorry, you're going to have to deal with the background noise. I was saying that someone kept muting me while I was speaking. All right.
No, yeah, the problem that we had is that there was like a glitch in the sound, and we were always like
maybe
listening
that it's a USB headset that you had and it went.
Yeah, I think that was the issue. Well, I apologize for the tech issues. But yeah, really happy to be here. And I'm also going to start off with a bit of a story, just telling you a little bit about Ushahidi's origins, just because I think it does align with the theme around building the tech we want. So I think it's what just talking about how we built the technology before I answer your question. So Ushahidi is a nonprofit technology company, technology and data organization that's been empowering people through citizen-generated data to develop solutions that strengthen their communities. It's an organization that was born out of the post-election violence that broke out in Kenya back in 2007, 2008. And I think the interesting thing about the tool and the organization is that it was born out of a problem that we were experiencing at that time. So we built it to fit within our context. We built it to meet people where they were, right? So we innovated around the mobile phone, which was the most ubiquitous tool at that point. When you're in trouble, you're going to pick up your phone, you're going to text people. And so we figured that would be the best way of making sure that everybody was able to share information around what was happening during that time. And that is a premise that we have continued to carry to this day. figuring out how to build technology that meets people where they are. Sometimes it might not be as fancy, but it works, right? And it's a philosophy that the founders kind of carried around, innovating around the tools that people have access to, that ended up being adopted in other places. So here's a tool that was born out of problems you always tend to associate with Africa: low bandwidth, bad governance, but that ended up having utility in many, many other parts of the world. And I think that that has helped us over the last 16 years to really focus on surfacing community-generated data to drive impact across various sectors using open source technology, which is another thing that was very deliberate, because we recognize the types of groups or the types of the type of people who would need to use the tool might not necessarily have the technical skill set, might not necessarily have the resources to go and build things of their own. So we figured it would be easier to help them not have to start from scratch. And, the platform's been used in over 160 countries, more than 200,000 times, really just empowering local communities to play active roles in building the future that they want to see. Now, over the last 16 years, our focus has been on helping people generate or collect data from local communities. And now we're really thinking about how we can then help them tell better stories with that data to build the world that they want to see, right? When I think about what we represent today and why we exist, it is to help people everywhere to quickly gather data, but also to generate insights that will help them tackle issues that matter the most to them, whether that's on human rights, whether that's on climate justice, good governance, or crisis response, and ensure that community-generated data sets are also growing into public goods that can serve as a resource to improve society. Now, on to your question around affordability of technological talent. So that's, I was thinking about this. I don't think that it was that big a challenge in the beginning necessarily, but I will say that I have felt it much more in a much more pronounced way, especially over the last couple of years. So I think the reality is we just can't compete with big tech. They come in, they pay really high salaries. We're a nonprofit. I think for many of us here, we know the challenge in terms of funding and just trying to keep the lights on. However, I think the thing that has helped us to navigate this challenge somewhat has been a bunch of things. One of them is our mission. It's been strong enough to inspire people who really care about the work, who want to come in and work with us. When you look at the origins of many of the people who've come through Ushahidi or who have worked in the organization, myself included, many of us actually started off as volunteers who were jumping in to solve a particular problem. It was either volunteering for the constitutional referendum or volunteering for the Kenyan election project or something or something else. And then just, got inspired by the power of sitting behind a black screen and seeing the impact that would create on somebody else's life. Which brings me to the second thing that's also supported us, the open source community. Right, again, going back to us starting off as volunteers, right? It was people jumping in and fixing. In fact, many of the features that Ushahidi has today are probably things that were built by the community and then submitted back through GitHub that then got absorbed because it was really coming from real world use cases of people jumping in and figuring out how to sort their own problems and figuring, we want to support this from an organizational perspective. But I also want to recognize that community has also become a little bit harder. And I know that a lot of the organizations that are working in the commons today can acknowledge that. The motivations are much more different. The economic climate is also very different. And so that one has been a bit more of a challenge, though we are tackling it through programs like Outreach and Google Summer of Code, which have also been really good pathways of helping us to identify young talent and then taking them in. I have two members of staff who we started off with as interns in these projects and are still working with us. Now, when I think about the current landscape, it feels like a double whammy because we're talking about how it's difficult to afford tech talent, but then also as new technologies are emerging, the supply of the talent required doesn't quite meet the demand, right? To Issa's point before, we're not just talking about coders. Right now, we're talking about, if I'm saying that we want to help people tell better stories with the data, where the analysts, where the machine learning engineers, can we afford the salaries of those engineers, especially considering that the supply is not as much as it was before. So I would say we are trying as much as we possibly can, but I'm also recognizing that it is much harder because of the inadequate, I don't even want to use the term inadequate, but we don't have enough talent to meet the demand. And then we also have the complexities of the kind of world that we're living in. We've just come from a period where, with the pandemic, the effect on people's mental well-being, looking at the types of challenges that we're working on right now, as well with the geopolitical landscape, the economic times we're also living in. If someone comes and tells me, hey, I care about your work, but then I also have to figure out how I need to put food on the table, that is something that we have to consider. So, yeah.
Thank you, Angela, for your thoughts. I love that you mentioned that the community has become challenging. I think it's like a fresh perspective, or at least we have mentioned a lot the community in this summit, but you're like the first one that add the challenging article to it, or like adjective to it. And I think that opens like a lot of questions and a different perspective on how to engage with all the things that we have been talking, like sustainability, maintainability, affordability, scalability. I think that acknowledging that communities are becoming like challenging is like a good path towards it. Okay, so before jumping into like the questions, I would like to go back to you, Zoe, and I would like you to ask you like an extra question. Well, the Free Software Foundation has been always like a referent. I remember when I was like a teenager, I was looking at it. But current times are like challenging for freedom and for free software. So what do you think now is like the biggest threat that software freedom, and how can we developers, and since we are mentioning a lot not developers people, how can we stop it, or how can we fight it, the threat?
Thanks for asking this question. I mean, there are several threats, I think, to our growth and our building a bigger community that is that supports free software. I think a lot of them have been mentioned. I like to turn it around a little bit and focus on the idea of education, because I think education is a word that covers a lot of the issues that we are facing right now, both inside our community and out. And I think a lot of it has to do, one of the things I heard one of the panelists say, that free software is hard, and I absolutely agree. Of course, making free software is hard. It is definitely a challenge for people to understand that there is more to their user interface these days than just the pop-ups on their screens. But I think the idea that software is hard in general is one that we sort of need to steer away from. I think if we educate people about the ideas that what they see on their screens and the cars that they drive and these days the microwaves that they use are created to be used in a certain way, but you can actually choose to demand more from it. And if we just educate people about the fact that there are layers and layers and layers behind all of those fancy flashy lights and simple clicks on press buttons, then I think we can get a very long way, because I think it motivates people's curiosities. And I think from there, they will use that curiosity to educate themselves and to go to all of our websites and learn more about what free software really, really is, and how important it is to demand some change over your technology. And that goes, you know, when it comes to using the tech that you want. But I think that also is the strength of a lot of the social movements that are out there right now. Like, for example, we mentioned Right to Repair before. I think one of their real strengths is really bringing things back to basics, bringing things back to the core of what the technology is made for, and then telling people this is yours. You have ownership over this, and you therefore need to educate yourself, learn about it, and then tell the world what you want to do with it, and make sure that you have the right to do that. And I think free software really is not far away from that. I believe that that is the way to tackle most of our challenges.
Thank you, Zoe. And yes, I completely agree. And in all the conference, in all the events I go, like education is always like a key point that everyone says, like we are like not paying too much attention to it, and we should like focus a lot on education in rights, in software, in analytics, in everything. So thank you for that comment. Okay, we have only 1 minute before like the next panel starts, so I will want to ask to the panelists if someone has something extra to say, something that they want to mention, some comment that they want to address. Now is the time.
Hi, Renata. Thanks for inviting me here.
Maybe there's one thing that I would also add in. I know that I mentioned that
Yes.
it is hard. I think one other thing that we are probably grappling with as within the open space is where we get the resources from, whether people are actually putting in money into this valuable public interest open source technologies, or whether they recognize the value in maintaining them because they work. I think there's a general, it feels like there's a recognition of the value of tools that have been there over time, but we are still struggling with this, people being interested in newer and shiny things. So the question around sustainability is one that I think would be worth maybe having a conversation about in the next Tech We Want Summit, so that we're not constantly in a rat race to try and compete with newer things and trying to explain to people the value of why it's important to fund some of the work that we all do.
You are the second person or like third person that mentions that we need to do like a summit of fundraising and sustainability and everything. So I think that Renata is answering in the chat. I think she's saying like yes. So I think like that's gonna be like next summit for sure. Okay, well, I want to say like thank you for like the panel. Thank you, Isabella, Sid, Denis, Zoe, Angela. Super panel. Super interesting people to talk to. I appreciate so much the time that you have and that you have come here. We are gonna pass to like the second panel, que es un panel en español. Así que radicalmente, I'm sorry, but I'm gonna need to change language.